Hey everyone, Jessica Whitaker here. I am a New York photographer, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the differences between three different prime lenses: a 35mm, a 50mm, and an 85mm in your portrait photography. These are my personal three favorite, and of course there are still a few more out there, but I wanted to begin with the basics. We have an incredible model, Kelly, joining us today, and I'm going to just be sharing with you in the most simple, broken down way as possible the differences between these lenses and what I would use the lenses for in my own portrait photography. Before we hop into the video, I do want to thank KEH Camera for sponsoring today's tutorial. KEH has been buying and selling photography gear for 40 years. They have the world's largest inventory of used photography equipment and probably the largest collection of film gear at great prices. Selling your gear to KEH is quick, easy, responsive, fair, and safe. It reduces the risk on selling or on buying on the flip side on eBay, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, or a random Instagram post. This is a great option if you're interested in trading up, getting affordable, accessible access to photography equipment. All of their gear is thoroughly inspected, and they even have like a grading system on each listing. Definitely check out KEH. I cannot recommend them enough. I have everything about KEH as well as all the gear that we used in today's shoot linked down below, as well as a discount code to KEH Camera. Let's get into the video. We're going to begin with a 35mm. This lens is great for travel because the focal length is wide enough that I can usually whip it out, snap a photo that includes a ton of the background and the environment without having to scoot back an extra 2 to 3 feet. It opens wide enough to 1.4 to be able to compress my subject nicely with a super shallow depth of field. You want to be mindful though when using this focal length for portraits and full body shots. For portraits, I suggest avoid taking close-up headshots. This will just distort your subject's face and make their nose and face look longer and wider because it is a wide-angle lens. With a 35, I cannot stress this enough. It is the most important to hold it at the proper angle, either straight and parallel to the ground or up and slightly tilted down. If you don't pay attention to the angle and how you're holding the lens, you will risk making your subject look short and stout because it is a wide angle lens. This Canon 35mm 1.4 lens typically retails for about $1,600 new. However, on KEH, I found this one for about $9.99. I would suggest this lens to anyone interested in portrait photography, but more so if you are doing maybe blogger, lifestyle photos, or you do travel a lot and want to incorporate the background into your portraits more. The 50mm is probably the most popular lens amongst beginner photographers, and for good reason. The focal length is ideal for standard portrait photography, it's versatile, and it's wide enough to place more than 2 people in the frame without compromising on leaving too much of the background out. There are 3 popular 50mm options at 3 different price points: 50 1.8, 50 1.4, and 50 1.2, which is what I'm shooting on today. The 50mm 1.8 lens was my first purchase 8 years ago, and it's now about $125 new. However, on KEH you can find incredible deals for even half off. So I found a 50mm 1.4 originally $260 for $228. I would suggest to begin with a 50 1.4, especially if you find yourself shooting in low light situations. This lens is extremely flattering to the subject because it won't pull your features or distort it, making this lens a little bit more versatile as far as getting creative and shooting at different angles can go. I would highly suggest this as my #1 top pick of a lens, whether you want to go with the 1.8, 4, or 2. It's incredible, and I think it's something that everyone should have in their gear collection, even if it's the only lens in their collection. It's incredible, versatile. I mean, look at how nice and compressed the backdrop is and how sharp these images are. .35 versus the 50mm. As you can see in the full body shot, the background is slightly more compressed on the 50, but the 35 is a little bit more elongated. I would definitely suggest for these shots in particular the 50mm over the 35. Last up is the 85 1.2 lens. This has been hanging out on my wish list for a while, and it's always fun to play around with. In my opinion, this lens is not a necessity, but it does an incredible job for portrait photography, especially close-up portraits like headshots. I will be sharing how a full body shot looks on this lens, and look at how far away I do have to be from my subject. So I believe it's more intended for close-up photos. It's razor sharp and can really make your subject pop out because of how shallow you can get with the depth of field and the focal length combo. I would recommend this lens for portrait photographers, especially if you do a lot of wedding photography, senior portraits, or even newborns. It really is an investment into your business, and it will improve the quality of your portraits. Just use wisdom when making the move. Because of the focal length, it won't be as versatile for, say, traveling with, but it does the job of portraits beautifully. This lens really can't stand alone in your kit. You will have to bring other lenses on sessions, but what this does for your portrait photography is amazing. KEH makes purchasing these fun 85mm lenses that aren't necessary to your collection but would enhance your business so much more affordable. 50 versus the 85. I prefer the 50 on the full body shot. However, I really love the 85 for these close-up shots, just giving that example that this lens really can't stand alone, in my opinion, on your sessions. It always will need a little bit of a companion. All three lenses side by side. I made sure that the angle was the same and that the pose was extremely similar. Hopefully this will give you a good idea of what lens you might choose depending on the pose and the angle and the overall final result you want in your portraits. how almost like proximity wise the lenses work. So for me in my own photography business, I work with a lot of bloggers, I do a lot of branding, photos, and I do quite a lot inside. People want to use images for Facebook ads or Instagram story advertisements with a lot of white space and room for text. So the 35mm is a fantastic option because I don't have to be too far back and really worry about proximity when it comes to the portraits, and I can still make sure that the background is nice and blurry, like how clients love it, while leaving tons of room for text. See how far back I really don't have to stand to be able to get a ton of this beautiful background. I mean, look at this horizontal photo. I wouldn't be able to do this with a 50 or 85 just because of the proximity. Next we have a 50mm. This one is a good option, but do take note of the fact that I do have to scoot a little bit further back. And if this was in a really tight coffee shop, or even if I was across the street but I was backed up against a wall, you know, you do have to be mindful of the proximity. But of course, I mean, this lens is gorgeous for portraits. It's just something to be a little bit mindful of. I wouldn't use an 85 1.2 on this kind of session just because I have to stand quite far back, and if I was in a smaller setting it just wouldn't work. But it is great if you want that one or two very intentional, very shallow portraits like you see in the end result, but just something that, again, I wouldn't use for the entirety of the session. All three lenses side by side in this indoor tighter space. The 35 is definitely my favorite because I was able to be intentional about bringing as much of the backdrop in the portrait as possible. But I think the second runner up for me would probably be the 85, just because the focus is completely and only on the subject. However, the 85 is the runner up because of the proximity. If I was in a tighter space, I probably wouldn't even have been able to use the lens. That's it, everyone. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you can take these tips and run with it, and maybe you have an idea for what lens you want to upgrade with, add to your collection, or even to begin with. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoy these free photography tutorials, and you can also check out the Build and Bloom Facebook group linked down in the description box below. Thank you again to KEH for sponsoring today's video, and I do have a discount code for y'all linked down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!